Hello, everybody. I see that we have some questions coming in, which is fantastic. Just to give everyone a few moments to get comfy and maybe think about some of the things you'd like to ask Julia and I. We'll just start by introducing ourselves. We did this a couple weeks ago together, so we're pretty stoked to get to do it again. I'm Carly. I'm a therapist here with OCD. I work with individuals who live with OCD as well as their supporters. And then I have there we go. My fabulous. I don't know. What would we call each other? I guess we're co-hosts to one another.
Yeah,
Co-host.
co-host. I'm Julia. I have a lived experience with OCD, and I'm here to help and answer all the questions that I can because I know how hard it can get, and I know how good it can get after you recover. So I'm here to help and encourage everyone to keep fighting.
I love it. Julia, I can't tell you how many times after our last webinar, I referenced everything you said from our last webinar, like everything from the cows, if it says move, we don't move. I literally there were so many gold nuggets. So folks, if you're interested in, I think everyone that comes on and presents for the No-C webinars are fantastic, but Julia is a wealth of knowledge. I feel honored to get to do this with you.
Thank you.
I'll pull up the first one. Let's give this one a go. Okay. I hope to see myself better soon. I've been on medications for so long. I'm in India. Not sure if I'll ever be able to get out of the OCD. I want to be fine like other normal human beings. I'll start off if you don't mind, because there's one thing that came to mind for me. I'm so interested if you caught on to maybe one piece of it too. This is the most cliche therapy thing I could ever say, but I'm going to say it regardless. I don't know what normal is. As a person who literally their career is to talk with people, I've yet to come to understand what normal means. However, I also recognize that I think this is a very common course that OCD takes with people, making them to feel othered and question and doubt themselves. So I just want to start by, validating that this is a shared experience amongst individuals living with OCD. However, I also want to challenge you and say normalcy is a different shape and size for every single person. And I think when we can lean into that, we actually move ourselves outside of OCD's grasp that much more. We make room for what could be rather than what we think should be. I'm also just it's so awesome to hear that you're tuning in from India. I love, one of my favorite aspects about working with OCD is that we really try to be a worldwide mission. And so I hope that this space is giving you some community. And it sounds like, you're taking all the necessary measures to be able to move yourself, as you said, out of the OCD. Just making sure you're using that ERP and the work that we'll be talking about tonight along too.
When I'm looking at this question again, like the normal thing comes to mind again, and as well for me. And I just want to say that I think what you mean is by return to back to myself, like how I was before OCD, or when I don't feel like I'm overwhelmed by OCD. But it's very important to also understand that once you go through this path, like there is not going to be your old normal self. You're going to transform into this completely new person, and you're going to know yourself way better. You're going to understand what's going on way better, and you'll have so much more tools. So don't try to chase that old normal self, because it's not going to exist anymore. You're transforming into something that's better, that's more capable of dealing with anxiety, and has more powerful tools. And also, I really like one of the therapists, like my hero is David Burns, and he talks a lot about the cognitive behavioral therapy. And there is one thing right now, like when you say normal, it's such a black and white thinking, and I feel like he would say, define for me what is normal. Normal when you feel anxiety, or like you never feel anxiety, then nobody is normal, because every single person feels anxious or off at some point of the day. But then if it's somebody who feels anxious at least sometimes, then nobody is normal. So it's very easy to kind of get stuck on this way to try to get yourself back to that old state. And it's this chasing that what gets you in a loop, and chasing that feeling, for me it's a huge compulsion, So letting everything go, take it day by day, slowly, doing a lot of self care, and doing your recovery work, and you'll get there, and it's going to be so much better.
I love that. I love how you said that it gets you like chasing this never ending, no finish line sort of race. And the only other thing I would suggest, you already put this perfectly, Julia, but that all or nothing thinking about what is normal. Very commonly, I hear people using the word should. I should be better at this by now, or I should have figured this out by now, or I should be more like this. And I'm like, who says? I didn't say. Did like Bob on the street tell you that? Because I'm interested in who's telling you you should be X, Y, and Z. And to your point, I think that when you meet the day with where it's at, when you meet the moment with where it's at, you allow to meet yourself where you're at, and that in actuality, that can be the baseline, that can be the normal, and you can keep growing that. And one of my favorite points that you made in our last webinar was that, quote unquote, we don't have a cure for OCD. However, this kind of care and treatment provides a whole new platform to live off of that helps in so many different ways, so many different shades.
Yeah.
So which one would you like to move to next?
I think we skipped the very first one,
Oh,
and
you're right.
Your Majesty
Mm-hmm.
actually posted. You skipped me with the
Oh,
setting, so I want to
oh,
go
I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. That was my bad. I take full responsibility.
back.
Julie, do you want to start us off?
I have a health anxiety, and I convinced the doctor I was bipolar, and was put on the medications. Turns out 6 years later, I think that it was my OCD talking lots of times. Can't OCD give mood swings? I feel like it definitely can. And how I see it is that like I feel like those mood swings probably happen because you have a lot of rumination and self-talk inside. So it's kind of like, you're chasing this, like, you're trying to figure something out in your head, and for a second you feel like you did, so you feel good, and then another thought pops in, and your OCD is like, but you didn't think about that, or you didn't really calculate for, like, what if this happens, or what if that happens. And it kind of like brings your mood down again, and then you try to chase, and you try to like dig yourself out of that, and then you feel better, and then for a second, when you kind of move on from OCD, you feel better again. And then you remember that you have all those symptoms, and it makes you feel sad again. So I definitely feel like it can give you mood swings. What do you think, Carly?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head, Julia. I think that OCD is such an exhausting process that most commonly what I hear is I go from anxious or at best kind of okay and then hit a low. There's times where there are better moments, but a lot of times that dropping, that exhaustion, the burnout, apathy, it's super, super common. It actually tends to kind of reinforce this. Well, something's wrong clearly because I don't feel okay. Here goes the anxiety spike again. The other thing that I think is really common is that there's this avoidance of feelings in general. So an individual might have this like kind of surge of emotion that's actually just really needed to be felt for some time. It was not this surge a week ago, but because we've been doing compulsion after compulsion, we've been doing these avoidance and suppression tactics, we're not feeling our feelings in the moment they're occurring, so it builds up. And that's what creates these surges. So, I think it's what I would describe, the OCD effect on a person's mood is it drastically affects how a person feels in what's the right word I'm looking for? Presently in the moment. It can drastically affect how exhausted or anxious or worried that you may be. I think when people think about swings, they think of like kind of out of nowhere going from one thing to the other. And what we're both speaking to is there's some contextual reason why your mood is changing. It's because you're ruminating, or it's because you've been ruminating for hours and you're exhausted, or it's finally gone, so you're exhilarated, or you're having a surge of emotion. So it's less about the fact that it's a swing, and it has more to do with the fact that you're stuck in a cycle that inevitably affects your mood.
Yeah, and I also feel like maybe it's going on so automatically that you don't really like
Mhm.
catch those moments when you start ruminating, and when you start doing compulsions, and when you're obsessing, and then it goes back. Like, basically anything that you do physically or mentally after like initial obsessive thought or a feeling is rumination. So if you're
Mhm.
doing that, it's definitely going to cause more anxiety. You're going to feel more drained physically and emotionally, and that's going to cause a lot of mood swings. And it's very important to catch those two. And it's very hard. Like for me, it took a very long time to realize how many mental compulsions I was doing, and I was so obsessed by this idea of like, oh my god, I'm not doing any physical compulsions, and something is still going on. Like I don't understand what's going on until I finally got that, and I was able to say to myself, oh, that's the topic that I'm obsessing about. Move on. Oh,
Mhm.
okay, that's again. Move on. 10,000 times a day. I just keep saying, well, and also there is like some research that says that people have from like 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day.
Mhm.
And let's say when you have OCD, probably 50,000 thoughts a day are about your OCD topic. So technically, you have to say, oh no, I'm moving on 50,000 times a day to yourself,
Mhm.
and then force yourself to move on. And at first, it feels very hard, but eventually, it gets easier, and you get less and less and less thoughts. And you're just slowly teaching your brain to not react to those anymore. And that's when your mood swings kind of level out.
Yeah, no, the more that you can lean into the moment as is and uh, not get entangled in your thoughts, as counterintuitive as it feels, because it does totally feel counterintuitive at the time, you actually level out because you're out of the fear cycle. Your adrenaline isn't pumping anymore. That cortisol is not all over the place. Yeah, really good point. I always think it's such a good education point, I think, to remind people that the average person thinks so many thoughts a day. Like you said, I think the average statistic is somewhere between 50 and 80. But then there's some research being done that shows that individuals with OCD might actually have even more thoughts than that. So when you think about that, that can be an exhausting process. I wanted to make a note that I forgot to make at the beginning, which is that we might probably going to bounce around a little bit about questions. So you might notice that I kind of jumped to one and not the other, and it has nothing to do with one question being better than the other. Just trying to get variety. However, guys will notice there will be a big pattern in what Julia and I are speaking to in terms of not entangling yourself with OCD and what it wants to, what ERP is all about. So we try to make sure that we're hitting questions that can sort of generalize elsewhere. I saw this one, Grace Face, which is with a cute little pup as an icon. How do you deal with relationship guilt with OCD, even if it's as simple as thinking of someone while doing a simple task? I picked this one again to generalize because I think guilt is like one of the most common triggers, emotional triggers that keeps a person kind of locked into their rumination. So the first thing that I want to bring up is guilt is it's a natural human emotion, and OCD loves to place meaning on emotions. It loves to say, okay, you're feeling guilty, you're feeling bad, you're feeling anxious, that must mean something's wrong. Or it's a simple emotional response because you're having a hard moment. And if we allowed it, it would probably last only about a couple of minutes, especially when we allowed ourselves to get back to the present moment and focus on that. But OCD doesn't want that of you. So it's going to throw ideas, it's going to throw what ifs, it's going to throw more at that, oh, that guilt feeling. That's a problem right there, isn't it? So, to your point, even if you are just thinking about someone during a simple task and OCD is giving you a bunch of what ifs, capitalizing on you feeling guilt, that's a moment to call OCD out and go, whoa, 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 wait a minute. I see what you're doing. I notice how you're trying to manipulate my feelings right now. I'm going to go back to whatever task I was doing and I'm not going to engage. I'm going to redirect my attention. I'm not going to engage with the content you're throwing to me. What do you think, Julia?
I think that guilt needs to be treated as just a symptom of OCD. And if you put more attention to that, it's going to grow even bigger. Think about it as like if you have flu, you have all kind of symptoms. You have like runny nose and your throat might hurt and you have a fever. Those are all symptoms. The same thing with OCD. OCD is the flu. Guilt, shame, anxiety, depression, everything else is a symptom. And when
Mm,
you have flu, you don't work specifically on just like fixing your runny nose. You're taking care of the whole problem. You're trying to take a lot of fluid, you're trying to recover your body from the flu, and that's when all the symptoms resolve. That's exactly what happens with OCD, I feel like. And when you look at the guilt and you concentrate on guilt, you just multiply it, you just make it worse. So just keep looking at it as a symptom.
Mhm.
Continue to do your ERP, continue to do your recovery work, and just know that when your OCD heals, like when you like in the recovery, that guilt as a symptom will go away as well.
Mhm. I love how I love that, that visual because we can all I think I use this constantly when I'm in therapy with someone. We are so normalized as human beings to uncomfortable symptoms of, like, an illness or even, like, I often say, "Hey, if you asked me to go run a mile right now, I would be frustrated and annoyed," or maybe, like, because I'm a runner, guilty because I didn't run as fast as I know that I could or, like, ashamed or something like that. I wouldn't question why those feelings came up. No, neither would you. However, with OCD, that's all we're doing. We're having this emotional response that's really no different than any of our other emotional responses, except our thoughts are trying to say, look at this, do something with this. So I love your analogy too. We got to treat this just like it's a symptom.
Hmm.
Symptom is the bigger problem, and we got to focus on the bigger problem, which is not giving OCD what it wants.
Hmm. Exactly.
Super awesome. All right, let's see what else we got here. Let's see. Mm,
I saw a question by Kristen.
yeah.
What are mental compulsions? I think that's a
Ooh,
good one
I'll
too.
find it if you want to start it off.
Yep, it was sent at 8:12 p.m.
12. Oh, thank you. You're so good at this. Yeah, do you want to start us off on what mental compulsions are? And I'll get Kristen's question lined up here.
I think, and I can miss a couple of them, but I think
Mm-hmm.
that mental compulsion, first of all, is when you basically put your attention towards the OCD obsession in general. You acknowledge it and you're trying to solve it. You're trying to ruminate. You're trying to analyze everything to find like a final answer. And you feel like, once I find that answer, I'm going to move on and finally, like, my life is gonna get back to normal. And I know, like, mental review, people do counting, um, self reassurance,
Mm-hmm.
and am I missing something?
No, I mean, I think you're hitting some of the really common highlighted ones. So one way that I describe mental compulsions is a pull. So when I'm trying to educate a person I'm working with about what to look out for in terms of mental compulsions, because they can always sound a little different person to person. Like one person's version of rationalizing might sound different than the other person. So I try to really invest in teaching them what these thoughts tend to feel like. They grab at your attention and pull you right under. So yeah, Julia already mentioned a couple of the real common ones. Theorizing, projecting to the future, negative possibilities, what ifs can be that. Reviewing. Oh, you already said mental review. So these are all basically the mind getting really sticky to a specific subject and keeping you sticky through these processes. And I think what's most tough for people with understanding mental compulsions is, well, it's not like I'm checking this physical thing. I'm just thinking. Yes, but you're thinking to try to figure out, to try to give a solution or an answer to OCD. And OCD is the doubting disorder. So if you keep on counting or you keep on reviewing, you're feeding the beast with what it wants more doubt, more need to sort of satiate its hunger, which it will never be satiated. And so when I'm describing what a mental compulsion is, I always say these are thoughts that pull at you and try to keep you under. And typically, when I describe it that way, a person is like, oh, yeah, that it does feel different than when I'm thinking about such and such a thing. Just to complicate it even further, you can think about a past event and it's not mental review. And you know the difference because you can pick that thought up and put it down relatively easily. Whereas mental review, that's a compulsion, it pulls you right under. And it's not just one time you're reviewing, it's over and over. It's a compulsion, no different than checking something physically. Yeah, I don't know. When you're thinking about mental compulsions, Julia, and you're trying to just like be vigilant to them yourself, are there specific textures or like signals that you sort of keep an eye out for so you know whether you're in that state?
I think it's specifically for me, but often it comes with some kind of emotion, whether
Mhm,
it's guilt or fear or anxiety or sadness or any other emotion. And basically, you just cannot handle this emotion and you're trying to get rid of that emotion. So that's why you're starting to do all the analyzing in your brain, doing all kind of solutions, trying to figure it out, trying to find an answer, trying to, like, like if you think a bad thought, then you're trying to think a good thought instead. So like you're kind of like
mhm,
suppressing that one, and I feel like that all basically at the core comes from trying not like, because you don't want to handle the emotion that you have right now and you feel like it's wrong, you feel like you should
mhm.
not be feeling like that. And by feeling like that you create even more of that emotion and then it's just gets into a cycle. So that's just like another part that I would like to add.
Yeah, I feel like we could probably spend a whole webinar on mental compulsions.
Absolutely, yeah.
1,000%. And it's not, people what people commonly say to me is, "I don't really have as many physical compulsions as I do mental compulsions," if they're aware of them, as though, like, this is kinda a unique experience. I'd say actually the majority of people probably have more mental compulsions than they do physical. That's what I find as a therapist working with people day in, day out with OCD. So, yeah, if you're looking for more kind of education based on mental compulsions, our website or our YouTube channel, I mean, just has like a plethora of information there. Of course, we don't want to encourage researching. However, if you want a little bit more variety, there's some really good stuff there. I saw one that caught my eye. Nicole Marie asks, is it common for our themes, intrusive thoughts to appear in dreams? It makes me so much more anxious. It makes me feel like it must mean something more. So I'll just start off with yes. Incredibly common for OCD to come up in dreams. The why of this from just kind of a cognitive thinking perspective is, especially if you've gone to bed ruminating or thinking about your theme, your brain's already on that stuff. However, just with or without ruminating before going to bed, your brain is primed for looking for threat, both internal and external. So it's not uncommon that we sort of play out our fears and discomforts in our dreams. So that is the why, but it's neither here nor there. What I really care about is, and it makes me feel like it must mean something more. That's OCD's work. It's no different than when we were talking about earlier about placing meaning on guilt. It's another symptom of its nasty web of trying to keep you suckered into, oh, well, this I have to figure it out because it's here too. What must that mean? Julia, what do you want to add to that?
Oh, Nicole,
Mhm.
I understand. I feel you.
Mhm.
How many dreams I've had about my OCD topics and waking up, in the middle of the night, freaking out and thinking that it must mean something. It's very important. How am I seeing this in my dream? But I really agree with what Carly says. I really feel like because you're stuck on this topic for so long, it kind of like becomes like a part of you, like, like for a period of time when you're like in the OCD spike.
Mhm.
And your brain, like you go to sleep but your brain keeps working. Your brain needs to make sure that you're safe no matter what you do, either you eat, sleep, or if you're awake or you're ruminating, it's on the same topic. It wants to keep you safe. So
Mhm.
because you already started this process of making it very important, it still goes, like you go to sleep and it still runs in your brain.
Mhm.
And with my experience too, like once you reduce your stress, you do your ERP, you reduce your compulsions, those kind of dreams, they also subside. And even if you do see anything related to your topic, it's kind of like the next morning you wake up and you're like, oh, it was pretty fun last night. Tried to like catch me in my dream, but I know what I'm doing, so I don't care. I'm not gonna let it
Mhm.
like ruin my day, or I'm not gonna think anything about that. And
Mhm.
that's how you treat it.
Oh, I've had people say sometimes it's not even just the intrusions or the themes, it's compulsion. So they'll dream that they do the compulsion in their dream. And that's really what they wake up to. Like the theme's kind of like besides the point, they're more focused on I did the compulsion. Like that's actually OCD is trying to get you really fixated on the fact that you had a dream where you did a compulsion. You, as you perfectly just said, you waking up and going, that was interesting. Let me go about
Mhm.
my day now. That's not what OCD wants. OCD does not want you waking up and just going, I'm going to keep living my life despite the fact that that was not my most favorite dreamscape I've ever been in.
Yeah.
Super. I saw that one. I was like, oh, we gotta give that a go. Any that you see that you wanted me to snag?
I'll let you choose.
There was one up here that I really liked about autopilot and rumination. Jordan, do you want to start this one off?
Sure. Thank you for doing this. Oh, I'm very glad to be here, and I hope I can help you guys with my experience. What are some tips to stop rumination when it feels almost autopilot? I, I understand that, yeah. I have read events false. I have real event and false memory. I also have OCD dreams, and it's exhausting. Jordan, I understand how exhausting it can get. I get it, and I remember being in the same position and also thinking, like when you basically start your brain, it really goes in the autopilot. It's like a train, when you like start the train, it's very hard to stop it when it's going to full speed. So even when you start doing the recovery work, it's not going to stop right away. It's going to take some time for you to slow that whole like power down and just like make sure that like that train comes to the stop. And it definitely can feel like it's autopilot, and it definitely can feel overwhelming, like you're just having so many racing thoughts in your head. And I feel like it's absolutely normal with OCD. I don't mean like normal, like it's okay to like to have it. It's very exhausting, it's very hard, it's very difficult. But again, you can do your recovery work, you can start doing ERP, and it will get better because you're going to teach your brain that it's not important anymore, and it's sending to you because it thinks that you're in danger. It's basically like it thinks that like if you're, for example, if you were in a cage with a tiger,
Mhm.
and very hungry tiger, your brain wouldn't stop. I think that it like you could be having like like anxiety and panic attack being in a cage with a tiger for like 2 3 days in a row, just like freaking out trying to save yourself. Your brain doesn't see the difference. It thinks that you're in the cage with a tiger, so it just keeps doing all those autopilot thoughts, and keeps sending those to you because you keep reacting to them. You keep reacting to every thought that you have, and basically showing your brain that yeah, it is very important, it is very dangerous, I need to continue to ruminate because like I had that thought and I had that thought, and like it keeps bothering me, so it must be important, I can't just let it go. But that's how it starts. Like start slow, try to reduce your rumination, and I know that it's hard, but just try to stick to just like okay, I know that this is my OCD topic. I'm going to move on. I'm going to pretend like I don't have OCD. If I didn't have OCD, what I would do. And don't even care what if your brain is going to freak out. Your brain is going to think that you're like crazy because you're putting yourself in such a danger. It's going to literally like make you even more anxious at first, but just stick through that and just keep going forward and just keep saying to yourself, this is my OCD. I'm moving on. I'm not going to pay attention to this right now. I'm going to pretend like I would do the same thing that I would do if I didn't have OCD.
Mm. Yeah, I really don't feel like I can add much more to that because I feel like Julia covered it like perfectly and in full. The only thing I'm gonna kind of bring up is, autopilot to me suggests, Jordan, that it's probably a really big habit for you, and that's putting it lightly, right? Autopilot means that you're able to just start doing it without even realizing you're doing it. So one of the things that I often suggest to people when they feel like they're reflexively or kind of in an autopilot way going right into their rumination, right into their compulsions, we want to slow that process down at least a touch. Just bring some awareness to the urge, the sensation of getting pulled into that stuff because there are signals. We were talking about that before. Julie, you were mentioning that feeling of an emotion coming up. I've had people describe it as this like itch, like it just feels itchy and I just have to like spend time there. So everyone kind of has their own signals, warning signs that their OCD is starting to act up. And one of the best ways that you can start to recognize what those are is doing a little bit of self monitoring. So that's what I often ask people to do when they start therapy with me. If they really are feeling kind of just in autopilot constantly with their OCD. It's simply just kind of going through your day and thinking about the times that you were most often ruminating, noting what was going on in that moment, what it felt like, sort of reflecting on it with the purpose of looking through that and going, where are the patterns? Oh, yeah, it most often happens that I'm in the car driving or doing something kind of driving isn't mindless, but we all tend to kind of sort of go into our minds while we're driving somewhere. Okay, I'll be super aware there. Maybe I'll throw on the OCD podcast or something like that so that I'm integrating ERP. Oh, it happens most often when I'm trying to watch a movie. Okay, got it. I'm going to be really keen for when I start to notice I'm no longer watching the movie and ask myself, what am I doing? I'm ruminating. So it's Julia already said it's not easy. It's small, little incremental changes, and it can feel so frustrating and so impatient. How this process does take time, and it takes small change at first. However, it really does make a big difference really quickly. These small little changes where you're starting to catch it just a little bit faster and notice the patterns really do help and are effective in turning off the autopilot so that you can turn on your coping skills, your response prevention skills. Okay. Any that you see that you were looking at? I saw one. I don't know if you want me to just grab to the next one.
You go ahead and jump to the next one.
So I saw this one because, and I really wanted, I don't think we actually spent a whole lot of time with, I don't remember if we did a lot of taboo theme stuff last time we were together. So I saw this one and felt like it was a good one for us to give a go to.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to, before I read it, I'm going to just define that a taboo theme is kind of exactly as it sounds and described. Taboo means any kind of theme subject that people tend to not really want to talk about. So this tends to fall under the sexual intrusive thought content, whether it be just sexual in nature with adults or with children. Pedophilia OCD can also often be like harm OCD, gender orientation, sexual orientation. These are all considered taboo themes just simply because people tend to feel more uncomfortable discussing them. So House of Steels asks, I have intrusive thoughts, OCD of sex or intrusive OCD thoughts of sexual thoughts of my parents. 99% of my day consists of this, and I just started an OCD, so hoping this all helps. Well, first off, congratulations for starting treatment. That is amazing. I just want to, what's most important to me about this question is bringing to the attention that these are some of the things that people go through with OCD, going like really fighting against the stigma of what OCD is. It is not simply that you're having the need to be clean or organized. It is torturous, unwanted thoughts that just really, like you said, 99% of your day consists. So I want to just start by commending you of taking the brave first step of going to treatment and also adding to this conversation tonight, because I guarantee there are so many people who are watching right now who are going, yeah, that's me too. And it does get better, whether we're talking about, a contamination theme or we're talking about an existential theme. This is simply no different. It's all going to be the same skills. As a therapist, I would not be catering any different skills to a taboo theme than I would a contamination theme. That was me I just wanted to speak on that broadly. Julia, I don't know if you have any thoughts or things you want to add.
I think that the fact that it's like a taboo topic, it kind of creates a little more fear around that because it feels like like I can't really talk about that, and like a lot of obviously a lot of feelings of like and shame and guilt and anxiety, and I completely understand that, but it's literally not any different from any other topic. It can be, like the same thing as how they call it, like neutral obsessions, when you
Mhm,
obsess over like your just like bodily functions.
mhm,
It's the same treatment. It doesn't matter what the topic is. It does not matter. You can obsess over bacon, and it's literally
mhm,
going to be the same thing. You need to do the same, you need to put the same steps in the same work, and it's going to work the same way. You're going to teach your brain that those thoughts are not important anymore, so your brain can relax and stop sending you all those signals, because you right now taught your brain that it's very dangerous and you have to figure this out, and you have to get 100% certainty that you don't want those thoughts, or
mhm,
that you're never going to act on those thoughts,
mhm.
or no matter what, doesn't matter what the topic is. And it's the same process. ERP create your hierarchy, expose yourself to your fears, like through the hierarchy, and sit with anxiety and sit with uncertainty. Teach your brain to like just show your brain that you're safe through ERP, and your
Mhm.
brain is going to listen, and it doesn't matter what the topic is.
Love that. Yeah, it's important to me to always just bring to attention that anytime any person makes the choice to do this therapy, they are effectively saying, I'm willing to sit with my fear and discomfort and learn a new way to manage it. And it's a super brave decision to make. And it's one of the reasons why I feel so called to this work. I feel like it's an honor to get to watch someone do that kind of thing. And Julia, you're a testament to it. You
Yeah,
can say exactly what that looks like and what that feels like. Okay, I'll move us along. Let's see. Hmm. Let's Okay, Brittany Smith. I would love advice to help my 12-year-old daughter who is struggling with scrupulosity. It's heartbreaking and frustrating. Any ideas of how to love and support and not enable? I love a good supporter question. How do I not enable my loved one's OCD? Julia, I'll let you take this one. I'll just start. I just want to start off by saying, in case anyone's not certain, scrupulosity is a theme that it is a little bit broader. There's kind of several different variations, but most often this refers to kind of a religious or faith, but on a more like even broader term, existential or spiritual sense, like, have I done the right thing? Is this okay? But yeah, any thoughts about how to best support and not enable the OCD?
I struggled with that, so I completely understand. And especially when you're 12 years old, it must be so hard and confusing. So it's really heartbreaking. Um, One thing that I worked through with my family members and friends that was very helpful is to kind of identify where is my obsession, like what falls into category of my anxiety, and then every time I would start to obsess and my friends and family see it, or I try to search for like reassurance or ask questions, I would have like a deal with my like friends that they would say, do you need solution or do you need comfort right
Mm,
now? Like, I'm not going to help you find that solution. I'm going to give you comfort. And instead of trying to like enable your daughter to do compulsions to relieve her anxiety, maybe tell her that you are going to feel anxious right now, but I'm going to be here to comfort you and love you and go through this because, and also explain to her that it is going to feel scary, but it's going to give you so many great results and it's going to make you so resilient in the future. And you're learning great coping skills for a future life. And let's just like sit with this anxiety together and learn that it's okay to handle it. And every time you do it, it's just going to get easier and easier for her.
mm. I agree. I think, what I work with a lot of families and kids through No OCD as a therapist, and I think that OCD 1000% is not just a disorder that affects the person living with it. It is very often affecting the people who are closest to that person because inevitably, rituals, compulsions, also known as accommodations on the supporter side, they just end up being a part of the process. And so Julia spoke to a collaborative effect that I always speak to when I am working with family members or I'm working with some kind of support person. Collaborate, talk about it, work with one another about educating what OCD is and what ERP is, come up with language, come up with response prevention skills. So I love that. Like, we're looking for a solution because we're not going to get it, but I'm happy to love you through it. I think one of the toughest parts is, as you said, Brittany, is it's heartbreaking and it's frustrating. I mean, this is true for any person who is supporting someone living with OCD. I find that parents in particular really struggle with not wanting to fix what's happening for their child and to make the distress go away because that's what's intuitive to any support person, but especially when you have a young kid, especially as a parent, that's what your role has always been, is to keep them safe and make them feel better. So it's kind of ERP in itself. It's kind of like an exposure often for parents when I ask them to, let their child feel the discomfort so that they can move through it, so that they can learn that it's temporary. It's a moment. It's not a great moment, doesn't feel wonderful, but that's how feelings work. They come, they go if we allow them to. So, yeah, I think Julia hit everything exactly right. Talk about it, make sure that you're really aware of, what your accommodations are. So, if you're working with a therapist, asking them to help you identify certain areas where you may not even realize it, but you're accommodating the OCD, and then come up with a very spoken about, communicated plan about how you plan to taper that back. It's the only last thing I'll add is that I often ask family members, I get it if you just want to start pulling it back all of the accommodations, but we're not looking to like rip off the band-aid. We're looking about having a collaborative, communicative experience. So yeah, it's not easy stuff, but however, Julia, one of the other points that I loved is when kids are facing OCD like this when they're so young, it's so tough and so confusing. However, they're learning skills for life when they start learning ERP. They're learning how to take on the hard stuff of life, sitting with it, not always looking for a fix, looking to be able to move through it and then move on with the moment. And that is hugely helpful in so many other arenas of life.
And also another piece that I want to add is like it's so great that you know exactly what your daughter is going through, and you're even saying that struggling with scrupulosity, knowing that your loved ones know exactly what you're going through is already in itself so helpful, because then like when your daughter understands that you know exactly what's going on, you really understand OCD, she's not going to feel like you judge her or you misunderstand her or um
Sorry, I grabbed away the
no
question.
worries. And she's going to like like that you misunderstand her, or maybe like judge her again. And knowing that you're like there for her, you know what's going on, and you're still
Mhm.
going to love her and support her through this, it's just so it's very helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, I hear a lot from, like, adult individuals that I work with how tough it is to think back and go, "Oh, yeah, OCD was there way before I ever recognized what it was," and so I really commend when parents can kind of identify it earlier on. Like, you're really setting even if, it gets a little bit better for right now, gets better to the point of baseline, and then it comes back up later on, kids already in a much better place to be able to take that OCD on at different points in life. So I'm just kind of, I apologize guys. I pulled away from the questions and got myself a little bit lost. Let's see. Hmm. Okay. Working on trying to, there looks to be a lot of conversation going on in the questions, which I really appreciate. It looks like there's a lot of support happening right now. I just want to remind you guys that this space is meant to be a community space, and that's exactly how you're using it, asking questions, learning more from one another. However, you're probably going to be best served with very ultra specific questions and getting kind of a lengthy or kind of treatment oriented response, engaging in that in therapy sessions when and if available to you. So I just want to throw that PSA out there, because I also do some social media presence, and I'm always very upfront that in these spaces we can only speak to things so specifically. However, it's really nice to see all of you really supporting one another. Let's see. I saw this one earlier by Toothpaste. So it looks like this was part of some of the conversation going on in the comments about what is compulsions, what's not. So I'm kind of guess a little bit, make some assumptions without finding the exact line of conversation. But it is healthy if you're using it for information, but it can easily become a compulsion and used for reassurance. I have a guess at what compulsion they're talking about. And researching versus information seeking. So I caught this because I think there's two questions I get very, very commonly. How do I know if I'm redirecting my attention or distracting? And how do I know if I'm information seeking or researching? And you can kind of answer both very similarly, but I'll speak to this in specific in a moment. If it feels pressured, if it feels urgeful, if it feels like, oh my gosh, I have to get this figured out right now, that adrenaline is running, it's a compulsion. If you are feeling pulled by it, nothing else in this world, none of it matters. You are just hyper focused on figuring it out or researching until you find that one piece of data that makes you feel good. That's how you know you're doing a compulsion, because compulsions kind of eat at all of your attention and want as much of it as it can get. However, if you're choosing to thoughtfully and purposefully slow yourself down, acknowledge what's going on, that you are uncomfortable, that OCD is grabbing at your attention, and redirect your focus, that's not distraction or avoidance. It's you consciously choosing to reattend your attention. Same thing goes with information seeking. This can be done by word of mouth. This can be done by getting on the internet. If you are able to go on and type out the one question you're looking for, find the article that best suits your needs, and kind of close the laptop after that. Maybe there's a few other clicks to grab a little bit more research, but it's slow, thoughtful, mindful. You're in an information seeking mode. However, if you are in the second hour going through the 60th different website and checking it between two others, strong likelihood it's the OCD researching.
And I think I got the question. It's two up. Is it healthy for someone with OCD to throw themselves full force in the OCD community?
Mm-hmm.
I think also, like, to add to that, if you're trying to do it in order to relieve some kind of feelings that you don't want to handle, I feel like it's not healthy. If you're doing it for educational purposes, to know how anxiety can present itself, how OCD can try to attack you, so you can be on guard, but you can really just read through that and then close your laptop and just like move on with your life and go through your recovery. I think that's a very helpful and healthy process. But if you're trying to watch every video and listen to every podcast to hear and make sure that you like hear exactly what you're going through, to make sure that this is OCD, to make sure that this is exactly the experience that you're having, and you're trying to like get all the information to get yourself reassured, that's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely being educated about everything about OCD is very important too, because I think, as I mentioned previously, knowing different topics that OCD can latch onto can be very helpful, because when you're in recovery and your brain is relaxed, it's not really relaxed to the point where it's like completely safe. It's
Mm-hmm.
still things that I'm looking for a threat around. So it can latch on to anything else that's important to you. And if you already know that that topic is kind of very popular for OCD, for example, like cleaning, and maybe like maybe, I don't know, maybe you had like sexual orientation OCD, and you went through that, you went through recovery process, and then you're cleaning your kitchen one day and you think, maybe I should clean that like one more time, and you get the urge. You already can say, oh, maybe I should clean it one more time, but I also remember that this is another OCD topic that a lot of people go through. So I'm just going to prevent myself from doing it compulsively, and I'll be aware that that's something that can happen.
I love it. It's so tough, right? It's a little bit confusing and a little bit uncertain, because I think once a person finds the OCD community, there's this like, oh my gosh, I'm finally seeing I'm not the only one. And so you want to just jump 2 feet in, and you should for sure. However, it's a tough truth, but a very important one to remember. Anything can become a compulsion. So I really liked how you brought up how, hey, if you're looking for reassurance, if you're, constantly seeking out that sense of relief through the community, we're just egging on the OCD. However, if you want to learn, you want to reflect, listen to stories that are of a different theme, something that you don't go through, so that you can be aware to it. I often talk to people about how that's a great maintenance skill, like going to different community groups or listening to these webinars and hearing different perspectives or different experiences with OCD, because it just strengthens your brain's ability to remember, oh yeah, I've learned this before. When and if OCD tries to kind of rear its ugly head again, I learned this thing. I've kept myself up to date on that ERP stimulation, and OCD is not going to trick me right now. So I really, really like that point. Any that you see you'd like to go to, especially, we've got about 10 minutes, so I think we have enough time for at least one or two, maybe three more.
I'm kind of concentrating on the like listening, so I don't really have time to.
No, you're okay. Here, I actually saw one that I was kind of nabbing at anyways.
Okay.
Daniel asks, can you please give me advice? I feel the need to watch a movie or show on the month it releases. Do I have just right OCD? Julie, do you mind if I speak to that
Of
to
course.
start off with? I'm going to speak to it from like a diagnostic and therapy perspective, but then I'd really love to kind of hear your point of view on how a person can respond to these kinds of questions themselves. Um, when a person is getting involved in treatment and kind of better deciphering what their themes are, what their triggers are, what their compulsions are, it's a bit of a process. So I get asked a lot, like, "Hey, does this sound like confessions, or does this sound like this theme, or does this sound like this theme?" And I can say, sure, yeah, it sounds like the theme. However, I will just say that, it takes sitting down and kind of learning what ERP is all about, better learning about OCD, and for many, working with a therapist to really decipher what theme it is. However, you don't need to know what the theme is to do the work. And I think that's like, I'm going to underline that's the most important point that I'll make during this question. Regardless of whether it's just right OCD or existential or harm or scrupulosity or anything, it's all going to have the same work, which is if OCD is giving you a ritual, a rule, this kind of rigid take on I can only watch or I have to watch things when they're released, we don't want to feed OCD. So, I mean, just throwing this out there, an exposure I would probably suggest to someone I'm working with is watch something the day after it's or the month after it's been released. So if it's released in January, you watch it on February 1st. So yeah, underscore, underline, themes do not affect the treatment. It's one of our big pluses against ERP. And when you are deciphering your theme, it is really helpful to have a therapist to help you work through that. And it takes a little bit of conversation and exploration. It's not always as simple as kind of reading one line or hearing one specific piece about it and going, yep, that's just right. Usually it takes a little bit more than that.
And I feel like OCD or usually comes in like with all kind of different masks. So sometimes like I know that some topics of my OCD went under a radar for a very long time, and I just thought that that's how I am.
Mm-hmm.
To eventually start my treatment and realize that like maybe not. Like for example, worrying about my mom was like a very big obsession for me when I was growing up, and I didn't know I had OCD, so I just thought that it's a normal thing. So you know, maybe look into and see what other aspects of your life you kind of like you have like obsessions and then compulsions that you're doing to help you understand, like the bigger picture. But at the same time, ERP works the same for every topic, for every team, and it doesn't matter. And I really like your advice. Well, don't watch it that month then. Give yourself, like 1 day or 2 days. Watch it late and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to make you feel uncomfortable. Just sit with that uncomfortable feeling and just make sure that you don't like just like let yourself feel anxious, let that anxious wave go through you and just like accept it and go like sit with that uncertainty of like maybe it just like doesn't feel right. Okay, well, I'm gonna handle it right now. I don't care, I'm gonna watch it tomorrow. And yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the things that will happen often when I'm working with someone at like deciphering some of their like more core fears or themes is it starts off here. It starts off with like, oh, it must be harm because of these such and such a thoughts. But as we're like kind of processing through what exactly the OCD is getting them stuck to, there's a responsibility component that just, as soon as we put the words to it, as soon as we put the words to, I have this fear of being responsible and harming people, whether we're talking about physical, emotional, or whatnot. Oh yeah, that clicks. It's totally something OCD is going after me. So, to your point, some of these things can kind of hide under the surface. However, it's all the same work, which is the one simplicity we get out of it. Okay. I'm gonna move down a bit. Any advice about starting ERP? Julia, do you want to take that one away? When you are just starting ERP, what's some of your advice?
Sure. First of all, make sure that you do a lot of self-care, meaning that like you kind of prepare yourself that you're going to feel anxious, so give yourself a lot of room for getting enough sleep, having a good diet. I think that those things are very important because when you take care of the physical body, your body has like more power to work better. Your brain has like more power to work better and help you go faster and like more smoother through the recovery process. I think that those things are very important. And also make sure that you build a very good hierarchy, and really like try to understand things that trigger you, and maybe even sit down and write down things that you they maybe don't even fall under a specific category of OCD that you know about, but still things that trigger you, and write them down and then show it all to your therapist, because your therapist will be able to see, and like kind of like help you build a better picture and better understanding of what triggers you, and help you identify all the compulsions that you have, and then really like start slow and remember that the process is not linear. It's going to get very good, very bad, good again, bad again,
Mhm.
but it's going up. Like your recovery, you're still going in the right direction, but it just feels very bumpy, and
Mhm.
it's going to feel very bumpy at first as well, and it's totally normal. It's totally okay, because at first you feel like, oh my god, I know how to do it, I know how, and you just feel like, you have all the tools and you're just going to start applying them, and your life is just going to, like go in a different direction, and you'll never have to deal with that. But then it still takes time for your brain to adjust. So once this euphoria of like, I know what to do, I'm going to go through the ERP and I'll be great, it kind of like, when the euphoria goes down a little bit, your brain kind of like starts to like trick you again. So that's why you have to stay very strong and make sure that you stick to your ERP, and you keep working, and keep giving yourself a lot of compassion. And even when you have bad days, don't feel discouraged, because it's completely normal.
Mm. Those are, I really don't think I could add anything more to that because all of the major points that I make when I'm working with someone who's brand new to OCD and ERP is we got to take it slow. A lot of times people are like, all right, when are we going to start the exposures? Or they're fearful of it. And I'll say, no, we have some other things we have to get to first. We got to get to education. We got to get to helping you to self monitor. So, most importantly, this is not a linear process, it takes time. We've just a couple minutes, but I caught one that I apologize. It looks like maybe I skipped over. Folks, I'm going to be really transparent. My eyeballs, once the questions start rolling in, it's not that I'm trying to pass by. It just happens that the questions move as we're talking, and so I don't always catch them. However, I'm happy to speak to, in the last couple of minutes, what are some of the causes for OCD. Very sort of broadly speaking, because every person's journey is completely unique to them. However, we do know that there's a genetic component. So, very often when I'm working with someone, if I ask them, hey, tell me about your immediate family, meaning like parents, siblings, maybe just one degree out, aunts, uncles, grandparents, there's usually someone who, at the very minimum, has anxiety, general anxiety, but it's very, very common that I will hear, yeah, no, they have the so and so person has OCD, or I think they have OCD. It's not diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure they have it. So genetics play a role. The other piece of this puzzle is, the OCD is intertwined with our fear response. So it is not something that necessarily is set off by trauma. However, it becomes this kind of habitual disorder, predisposed disorder that a person's brain becomes overreactive to what the brain believes is fear. We've been talking this whole night about how the brain is constantly seeking for threat. When OCD is in the driver's seat, the brain is overreactive, overstimulated to threat. So that's what's causing the rumination, the compulsions, the what if thinking. But what is the major source? Why does one person have OCD and another person doesn't? There's no real science to support a very specific reason. We know that it's genetics. We know that sometimes it's behavioral. There's some pieces that people will pick up from others. Like if you grew up with someone who was a ruminator or who often was seeking reassurance, that can be behaviors we pick up. And if you have an anxious predisposition, it can kind of turn it on. So that being said, those are some of the most common reasons OCD is, or someone is affected by OCD. The only other thing I'll add is that for children, PANS and PANDAS are a really common cause of OCD. Actually, I should rephrase that. Can be a cause for OCD, and that is due to a viral infection. Most often, it's strep. This is stuff that can be talked about with a primary care physician if you have a child whose OCD kind of came on overnight, because that's really exactly how it looks. That's something to bring to the primary care and discuss with them. However, the majority of people find that it evolved over time. So I apologize again if I missed out on anyone. Again, these questions move as we go. And so if I didn't catch you, it's not because I didn't want to. However, just a reminder, everything that we talk about here, all the questions we answered, they follow a very common theme, which is don't do what the OCD wants you to do. Do your very best to disregard it, to disentangle from it, detach from it, tell it no and tell it off.
Mm-hmm.
Sit with discomfort, allow feelings to be feelings, let them be temporary. Yeah, any last sort of summarizing thoughts, Julia?
Yeah, anxiety would not be a problem, and OCD would not be a problem if it didn't give you anxiety. So
Mhm,
it's completely normal that when you try to like start to face your fears and you try to sit with anxiety and with OCD and uncertainty, it's going to make you feel horrible.
mhm,
But it's very hard. But that's how the process works. You need to get worse before you can get better.
mhm.
So just stick to the process and trust the process, and just trust yourself, and keep doing the work, and you'll will get there for sure.
All right, folks, we're going to sign off from here. Have a good rest of your evening, and thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye.